Hello and welcome to the latest edition of SRM's Cyber Insights webinar series. So we've got folks dialing in from the US, UK, and Europe. We'll make this recording available for others to watch after today's session. So thank you very much for joining. Just a quick note that there is a Q&A functionality in Teams. So if you have any questions during the session, if you could use that functionality to pop them in there, and then we'll read through them and try and keep some time to discuss at the end of the demo. Great. So just introducing who's going to speak to you today. So I'm Jill Ferron. I'm head of SRM's Offensive Security Practice. I'll be kicking off the webinar and running through a quick agenda shortly. And then I'm joined by James Taylor, who is a Red Team lead. So James is going to be telling us about the engagements he works on, and then running us through a live demo that we're really all here to see. So quick overview of the agenda. So today's webinar is focused on insights from the offensive security team. And specifically, we'll be digging into the Red Team operations. So once I've briefly introduced SRM, and we've got that really out of the way, we'll run through three key areas. So we'll tell you about the types of engagements that happen on the Red Team. The point is to give you a bit of a peek behind the curtains of how we define our Red Team engagements at SRM. We'll then focus in on a type of assessment that we call assumed breach, and we'll run a demo of how a Red Team operator would go about hiding themselves from detection from a fairly sophisticated blue team with access to tooling like EDR, and then achieve the Red Team objectives of, for example, deploying domain-wide ransomware. And so then we'll move on to the key insights and takeaway from the demo, and then wrap it up with a bit of Q&A. All right, so the quick intro on SRM. So SRM, we're a global intelligence and cybersecurity consultancy. So we've got a really diverse team. We're headquartered in London. We have offices all across the world. Cape Town, Hong Kong, New York, Rio, Washington, Utrecht, and opening in Asia soon. Our team has a backgrounds in intelligence, government, finance, journalism, the military, and academia. So we're really providing a breadth of consultancy. So we work across three capabilities: intelligence, resilience, and response. So really quickly, how does offensive security fit into the services that we propose at SRM? So offensive security is a resilience-focused service. So we help our clients improve their security posture, and we do this by helping them think like attackers to prioritize actual threats rather than perceived threats. We help them proactively identify and remediate vulnerabilities before they can be exploited by someone with a malicious intent. The other thing is that we increase security awareness by showing the potential impacts of security vulnerabilities on an organization. And then the last point is that we help support with anything that is compliance driven as well, so typically pentesting. So we provide many services in offensive security that are designed to test the controls that are put in place to defend against cyber attacks. So the main one that we're going to talk to you about today is the red teaming service or adversary simulation. So this really covers the most complex type of engagements that we run in offensive security, and we'll talk about it more in depth shortly. But just to give you an idea of who runs red teaming, it will generally be organizations that are a bit more mature in their security posture and defenses. Typically, they would have a managed SOC or internal security team, and they want to understand how they would fare against a more realistic threat. The second type of service is pen testing or ethical hacking. So it's a service that really focuses on various types of technologies or scopes. And we look to identify the risk that is posed by the business from any vulnerabilities discovered. And then we also do everything that's social engineering related, so phishing with MFA bypass, phishing, etc. And then finally, on the continuous assurance side, we perform monitoring of external attack surfaces to highlight changes in exposed services over time and how they influence an organization's susceptibility to compromise. Okay, so really quickly, we're going to talk about red teaming in a lot more detail soon, but how does it differ from pen testing, and what are the benefits of both? So penetration testing is really kind of a core component of an organization's cybersecurity maturity, but it allows them to gain an understanding of the risk represented by specific components. So for example, an individual application, a system, a network in isolation. And the idea is that you really want to provide a breadth of coverage within the shortest period of time. And that means that often security solutions that can cause friction during the pen test are bypassed in order to get to that objective of maximum value and maximum breadth in minimum amount of time. So you don't really get to see how your organization would fare against a realistic threat, but rather what are all the potential options that would be available to a threat. So if you're looking to understand the risk presented by a new system, a change, or anything like that, that's a really good option. But the second option, obviously, is red teaming, and this is looking to test not only technical controls, but also people, processes, and procedures. It'll help you determine weaknesses in areas that a pen test might miss or ignore. So an example is, when we're running red teaming, often we have organizations that have MDR in place. So that's great. It might create some alerts based on the activity that the red team runs. But we want to know as well what's done with those alerts. So what is the monitoring team doing with the alerts? How is it surfacing them, selecting them, and making sure that the threat is identified and contained, or potentially not. So the red team is really not driven by the discovery of vulnerabilities. It wants to look at kind of all the available attack paths, and then it will pick the attack paths that will allow them to complete the objectives of the red team. And that's really exactly how a threat actor thinks as well. So they will look for a way to get to their objective and generally pick the one that is most suitable to them at that point, and not really trying to exploit everything available. So an example is if you wanted to gain access to specific intellectual property, for example, source code for a critical system, then you might want to look at compromising a specific repository, and you might not need to gain domain-wide privileges to do that. You could get access to a developer account that might give you a direct way into that objective. And then kind of at a stepping back a bit, the scope for a red team is really very inclusive. So whereas a pen test, we say exactly these systems and these items are in scope, for a red team, we'll try and say, we want everything to be in scope unless it's excluded from the scope. And the point is that we really want to understand and demonstrate the true impact of a breach in a safe and controlled manner. So what does a red team at SRM look like? So, some of the stuff that sets us apart is that the red team at SRM leans on our world-class incident response team. We have one of the largest incident response team in the UK. We work on over 500 breaches every year. Typically, our offensive security consultants also participate in incident response work streams. So we have a lot of experience with that. We have a lot of intelligence from those attacks that we bring into the scenarios that we develop. and into the techniques, the tooling, the methodology, etc., that the red team uses. So some typical scenarios can include malicious insiders. So if you have a disgruntled employee, for example, a stolen device, an implant or a drop device, an opportunistic internet-based attacker, or we might think about leaked credentials, API keys, things like that. The second thing that sets us apart at SRM, and this is an offensive security, but also kind of at a larger scope, is that we want to make cyber simple. So we put consultancy first. Our explanations and advice are really appropriate for the audiences that we're targeting. And we ensure the impact is communicated effectively without getting lost in all of the technical jargon that can surround cybersecurity. And we want to make sure that the remediation and the actions that we propose are useful and are used by our clients to enable them to actually strengthen their security posture. And then the third point is that we have a very strong background as an intelligence company. So we make use of all of the closed and open source data that we have to identify kind of the needle in the haystack and dig into potential weaknesses that we discover to find the path to compromise. We might also work with specialist investigation teams, and that is really a mindset and an ability that sets us aside at SRM. And then finally, we attempt to evade any defenses that are in place, and we make sure that we maintain a detailed log of our activities so that retrospective threat hunting can be performed and potential detection opportunities can be implemented. So this is kind of a key part of the red team. So identifying holes in and subsequently tightening them makes it more difficult for a real threat actor to perform similar activities in the environment in the future. So that is the point of all of this, is understand what the impact of a breach would be like, and then improve on what's been done to make sure that should this happen in the future, you're in a better position. All right, so I'm going to throw it over to James now to run us through a bit more of what the red team does, and then get into the demo.
Thanks, Jill. Okay, so I guess what type of work does the red team actually do? So we try to keep things simple, and we break down our offerings into 3 primary categories. We also offer Purple Team services, which is sort of a collaborative assessment with your internal security team, and that focuses more on individual techniques rather than exploring the impact of a potential breach. That type of service provides a detailed overview into your visibility of sort of common attacker tools, techniques, and procedures. And then we would obviously provide advice on how to increase that visibility. So the 3 main sort of types of attacks or types of scenarios that we break a red team up into, the first being breaching the perimeter. So this is an exercise that essentially takes the perspective of an external threat actor, an internet-based threat actor, and attempts to identify attack surface that can be used to gain access to the internal network. That can include things such as social engineering, even physical intrusions, physically breaking into office space and leaving behind a device that allows the red team to connect in, or the exploitation of services on the public internet. The next service, which we'll also go into in a lot more depth shortly, where we go into the actual demo itself, is Assume Breach. So Assume Breach is sort of a middle ground assessment that allows a client to experience the impact of a breach without having to invest the time required to gain initial access. So it essentially assumes that a sophisticated and persistent attacker will eventually gain access into your environment and tests your ability to detect and to respond to a threat that's already inside your perimeter. And then the final one is the end-to-end, which is essentially a combination of those 2 services. That's the sort of most time-consuming and the most complex of engagements. and that can be all encompassing. So that can take on the form of, social engineering attempts, physical intrusion, exploitation of internet-based services, and then once inside the internal network, that's where the focus would shift towards completion of predefined objectives. So that could be things like domain-wide ransomware, or exfiltration of sort of key information. And this is the kind of scenario that we'll be following in the demo shortly. So a common question that we get is, isn't an assumed breach sort of cheating if I'm ceding you access into the environment? Doesn't that defeat the point of a test like this? And there's sort of common phrase that's thrown around in cybersecurity quite a lot, that there's two types of companies, those who know that they've been breached and then those who don't. And I think a persistent and targeted attacker with sort of unlimited time frame for compromise will eventually breach the perimeter, and for us as consultants, we're often tied to a sort of a time window, so it can be very difficult to simulate that type of attack. Whereas an attacker can profile your technology stack and wait until it's 0 days released for an edge device that you have. That would be impractical and very expensive from a consultancy side of things. An attacker can also attempt multiple social engineering campaigns over an extended period of time. So this is a way of skipping to that step, to the actual compromise, and allowing us to sort of realize the impact of that. As I mentioned, there's also the sort of associated cost. So due to the time requirements involved, initial access can be pretty expensive. So assuming that this phase will eventually be successful allows us to focus on the often overlooked internal environment. And then the exploitation of more complex scenarios, or exploration of more complex scenarios, I should say. So assumed breach allows you to focus on scenarios which are unlikely to arise in a time-bound initial access attempt, but things that should be on your radar as potential avenues into your business. So things like malicious insiders, supply chain compromise, third-party provider compromise, or the direct development of a 0-day exploit targeting your infrastructure. And then defense in depth. So, the initial access phase could be unsuccessful, especially when there is limited attack surface and, things like social engineering are out of scope. So in this event, providing a leg up allows you to get the most out of an assessment without having to sort of, stop the assessment prematurely. So that takes us on to the next point. There's another common thing. I've got EDR, I should be fine against these types of threats, right? So that's a common theme that we've observed. Typically once a company is purchased and deployed EDR throughout the estate, there's the perception that, you must be secure from all threats at that point. And I guess the reality is that if the alerts are coming through, but you're not actioning them, or there's a portion of the estate that is missing endpoint detection and response capabilities, then, given enough time, threat actors may still be able to eventually bypass your defenses and complete their objectives. And that takes me on to the next point, that in reality, as can be seen from a lot of our recent ransomware cases from 2023, although the majority of our incident response clients did not have a centrally managed EDR, in approximately 1/4 of these cases we responded to, a centrally managed EDR was deployed throughout the environment, and the threat actor was still able to deploy ransomware. That could be due to things such as alert fatigue, missing alerts in the first place, or misconfigurations in the way that the EDR system is deployed. And that, I guess, feeds nicely into the next section, which is over to the live demo. So basically, we will be conducting an assumed breach assessment, and in this scenario, it's slightly Game of Thrones themed. Sorry. We'll be conducting an assumed breach where the scenario starts from the perspective of Khal Drogo, who is a systems admin, and is basically using a server for email and internet browsing instead of the assigned workstation. So sort of that separation of duties and not following the principle of least privilege. So at this point, we've already convinced him to download and execute our malicious code. That allows us to take remote control of the server. From there, we're going to start to enumerate the internal environment, and we're going to look for some really low-hanging fruit that can allow us an easy path to escalate to sort of the top level of privileges within that internal domain. And we're going to identify that common attack path, and it's related to Active Directory Certificate Services, or ADCS. So ADCS is like a digital ID card for your computer network. Essentially, it helps ensure that computers and users can trust each other by issuing and managing digital certificates. Those certificates essentially act as electronic passports, and they verify the identity of the devices or the people on the network, which normally makes it more secure. The attack path we're going to follow is going to abuse a misconfigured certificate template, which allows us to escalate our privileges to that of a domain administrator, in this case, Daenerys Targaryen. And essentially that gives us the keys to the kingdom. So we'll then complete the objectives. So the objectives in this case are to exfiltrate sensitive data and to conduct a ransomware simulation on a critical server, which will be a domain controller in this case. And the domain controller is essentially the boss of the network, managing who can access what resources and ensuring that everything runs smoothly. Okay, so speaking of running smoothly, I'm going to step into the demo now. Okay, so here we have three primary servers. So this is the attacker's workstation, and we're going to be using a piece of software called Cobalt Strike. So this is legitimate attack simulation tooling, but unfortunately, it's often used by threat actors as well. There's lots of sort of cracked versions of older versions of this software, so it is involved in a lot of cases. We're going to be using this to basically take remote control over the victim workstation, and then we're going to follow through with the attack path that I previously spoke about. So this is our attacking workstation. We then have the victim workstation or victim server, and then we have the domain controller. So the domain controller will be the end goal, and the objective is to exfiltrate sensitive information. So we're going to be trying to exfiltrate the High Council's evil plans, essentially, and then conduct a ransomware simulation, encrypting only the text files within this given directory. So we'll step into it. So what we see here, we're basically going to be abusing a technique known as steganography. So I'm sure most people will be familiar with cryptography, which hides the contents of a message, keeps that secure. Steganography aims to hide the fact that a message is even there, basically. So in the two images that you see in front of you, we've got the original image unedited, and then we've got the second image, which actually contains the malicious payload, which in this case is Cobalt Strike, which will eventually get loaded into memory and then allow us to remote control this machine. So the scenario here is that Khal Drogo is using this workstation. He's been convinced to download our malicious executable, and then we're now going to run that. And if all goes well, fingers crossed, this should start to run through a process of reading in this image file, extracting the malicious payload from that image file, and loading that into memory. So this is sort of the transport to get Cobalt Strike into memory. As we can see, we've got Windows Defender enabled, turned on up-to-date virus definitions, and fingers crossed, currently we're still running. So if I head over to our attacker's workstation, we can now see that we do in fact have a beacon. And a beacon essentially is the terminology used to describe our remote access agent. So I'm just going to set this to sleep for a shorter amount of time. So basically at the moment, this is calling in every 1 minute and asking for tasking. So it basically says, do you have anything for me to do? No. Okay, I'm going to go back to sleep. Or yes, I have something for you to do. And then it will try to execute that task. So while I've set that to sleep for 5 seconds and we're just waiting for that to check in, I'm just going to quickly head over to here and we can see that we're all still running. So that's a good sign. That's probably the most that's the scariest part of the demo, just in case that gets detected. But at the moment, we're all good. Okay, so that has now checked back in. And at this point, we now have, remote control over this victim workstation. So at this point, I could do things like I could ask for a screenshot, and that is going to grab me a screenshot of the local desktop. So then if I head over to screenshots, we can see that, yes, I can sort of remotely take screenshots of the system now, and I can fully control it. So what we're going to start off by doing is we're going to execute some post-exploitation tooling or some extra software in memory. And this is going to look for vulnerable certificate templates, or in this case, it's going to look for all certificate templates that exist on the internal network. So we can see that has started to run, and hopefully that should start coming back with quite a lot of information. And we're just going to skip through it and get to the bit that we want. So we can see that has completed. And if I scroll up here, there's, in this case on the network, there are several certificate templates that are vulnerable. But the one that we're looking for in particular is one called ESC1. And it's a particular type. I might have skipped past it. This is the problem with live demos. Let me find where are we? Some CA. Here we go. Yeah, this is the one. So the reason that this certificate template is vulnerable, basically all domain users, which is considered a low privilege group because all users by default are part of this group, have enrollment rights into this template, and it can be used for authentication. So it can be used for client authentication. There's no signatories required, so nobody has to essentially sign off that this is that we're allowed to request this certificate template. And the primary thing is that the enrollee supply subject flag is set, which basically allows anyone who can enroll in this certificate template to specify any other user, and then obtain a certificate as that user that can be used for authentication. So that's what we're going to do right now. So we're going to request a certificate as Daenerys Targaryen, who happens to be one of the domain administrators in this case, or one of the most privileged users on this domain. So fingers crossed, if all is well, that should come back with a certificate. And there we go. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to copy this little section, which is the certificate itself. Okay, and I'm going to head over to a terminal, and I'm just going to create a file. I'm going to call it cert.pen. I'm going to paste in the contents. And then we are going to generate another certificate, which can be used with another piece of post-exploitation tooling to essentially authenticate as Daenerys Targaryen. So we now have our cert.pfx, which I am going to upload to the victim workstation. Okay, so now that certificate is uploaded to the victim workstation, and we can start exploiting this misconfiguration. We can use that for authentication. So just to show that we currently don't have domain administrative privileges, I'm going to attempt to list out the C drive of the domain controller. So this is an operation that would require local administrative privileges over the domain controller. And in this case, we can see I get error access denied. which means I don't have the appropriate levels of permission. So now I'm going to use the certificate I'm going to use the certificate to authenticate the domain as Daenerys Targaryen, who should have permission to be able to list that C drive. And I'm going to inject that authentication information into my current session. So my current user will essentially become the domain admin. And something has gone wrong, which is where are we? Okay, I think I know what may be wrong here.
While you're looking into that really quickly, I might just answer a couple of Q&As.
Sure.
So I think the first one that we received is, what is the usual or average time frame of on-keyboard time for a red team? So it's very difficult to answer that because the on-keyboard time will vary widely depending on the objectives of the engagements, depending on the type of engagement. So James was talking about, whether we do end-to-end, external perimeter breach, assumed breach, etc. And also quite a few other factors like, the complexity of the environment, the defensive measures in place, what type of threat actor we're trying to simulate. So is it a fairly sophisticated threat actor? Do we have to deploy a lot of OPSEC, or are we trying to simulate something that's maybe more on the entry level side? So lots of variables in that answer, but basically what I would say is that at minimum, if we want to get a good understanding and spend some time in the environment on an assumed breach test, we're looking at a couple of weeks to get a good value from that engagement. That's kind of the minimum time. The more sophisticated you become, the more time you'll need in the environment. And similarly, if you're doing an end-to-end test, for example, you'll be looking at probably at least double that amount of time. Okay, another quick question. Do we use something other than Cobalt Strike on engagements? So are customized C2s or other types of C2 frameworks? So yes, we do. We use other types of C2s. In this specific instance, I think we wanted to actually demo something a little bit different. But given the demo environment, we ended up using Cobalt Strike. We do still find that Cobalt Strike is used in a lot of the cases that we work on in the incident response side. Generally not Cobalt Strike vanilla, but some sort of variations on it. So it's still hugely popular. And yeah, we do develop our own stuff internally as well to be able to simulate kind of more sophisticated threat actors. And we have access to other C2 frameworks.
Thanks, Jill. So managed to troubleshoot that issue. And now we've got a certificate that we can use for authentication as Daenerys Targaryen. And we've used that certificate then for authentication. And we hopefully now should be able to access the domain controller if all has gone well. And we can see that we do now have access to the domain controller. So by proxy, that means that we're now running as the domain admin. So the next thing that we wanted to do as part of our action on objectives, so now we've got the appropriate level of privileges to be able to abuse or to be able to execute our action on objectives. We're going to have a look at the critical server, and we're going to have a look to try and find that top secret high council plans, which we can see here. So I'm just going to download these plans. Oops. And then once that completes, I should be able to go to the downloads, and then we can sync these files. And we're going to sync it to Red Team Demo. And now, if I have a look for top secret high council plans, we can see that we've now exfiltrated the super sensitive information from the top secret plans. And now for the final aspect of the test, which is to simulate the effect of ransomware. So what we're going to do is we're going to use our custom ransomware tooling, and we're going to upload it directly onto the victim workstation. So you should see here, there's currently no ransomware binary there. We're going to upload that. We're going to upload the let's look that yeah, here's the sorry, apologies. This is there's just a small typo in my notes. So let's try that again. And okay, so we've uploaded our ransomware to the victim. And I'm just going to upload the key and the nonce for the encryption process. So this is just so that we can reverse the process afterwards. You know, it probably wouldn't be a great ransomware if you're also uploading the key for real. But in this case, you know, this is fine. So if I head over to the victim workstation, we can now see that these have been uploaded. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to run that ransomware from the victim workstation, but remotely targeting the domain controller. So that avoids me having to run it sort of directly on the target that I'm trying to encrypt. Okay. So now if I head over to the domain controller, when that task executes, we can now see that there's a .enc extension next to the all the text files within the directory that we specified. So we specified start from the desktop and basically go down and encrypt all those files. And if I try to open up that file now, and we're going to use Notepad, that should be scrambled contents. Again, yep. So we can see that that has indeed been scrambled. And if we look here, we've got our fake ransom note that just says, you know, all your files are now encrypted. And then because we're not actually a malicious threat actor, let's revert the damage that we've done. So we're just going to decrypt these files. Decrypt. If we head back over to the domain controller, we should see the original files pop back out, and we can open that up, and it's still there. So yeah, so that's basically a small sort of assume breach demo. You know, slightly contrived example, but this gives you an insight into the kind of things that we would sort of we would do. And in this case, we've exfiltrated some data, and then we've conducted an example ransomware simulation. And all of this has been conducted whilst Windows Defender is fully enabled on both of those workstations. Okay, so I'm just going to stop sharing the demo now and then switch back over to the remaining slides. Okay, so yeah, that was the live demo. Slight hiccup in the middle there, but I think we overcame it. So basically, just to run over that attack path one more time. So this attack is only possible due to the excellent research of some really clever people over at a company called SpectreOps. In 2021, they discovered that these certificates, more specifically the templates that used to create these certificates, could be abused by attackers. There's currently, I believe, 14 different abuse primitives to be able to abuse to escalate privileges on a network. With this one I've demonstrated here being, probably the most common that we see. And it's a very sort of low hanging fruit issue that will allow you to go from a low privilege user straight up to a high privilege user, typically. And it's a very simple exploit to run as well. So this is this type of thing we are seeing in the wild more. So yeah, I guess the attack we demonstrated is only possible due to the fact that we have overly permissive access to a particular certificate template. So this allows us to manipulate the resulting certificate such that we can pretend to be any user on the network, essentially. So think of it like a good sort of a really good passport forgery. So the attacker is changing the name and the picture on the passport, and the passport's considered 100% legitimate. So you're able to pass through under this new identity, and you receive all the associated privileges of that identity. So just some key insights and takeaways. I guess the key issues here. So if you're not actively investigating and responding to alerts from your EDR systems, you could be missing some of the warning signs of an attack. Unfortunately, security is not really a set it and forget it kind of field, and does require that consistent attention. Performing assumed breach activities gives you the most realistic understanding of your current internal security posture. So if you assume that a breach can and will happen, then you're going to have the right mindset to approach the evaluation of current systems or the development of new systems with defense in depth at the sort of forefront of your mind. Although malware is prevalent in intrusions, attackers can also make use of legitimate software to complete their objectives. It's commonly referred to as null bins or living off the land binaries. So these are things like Microsoft signed binaries that are dual function. They perform a legitimate use case, but they're also able to be abused for further attacks. Since the pandemic, and with many organizations operating on a fully remote or hybrid model, the perimeter to protect has become more blurred. And the recent popularity of hardware-based attacks against physical devices, even those that are protected by full disk encryption, could lead to the exposure of sensitive information, or provide a pivot point for a sophisticated attacker to be able to potentially compromise assets on your network. But what can you do? So it's not all doom and gloom. You can perform adversarial exercises to make sure you're protected against or at least aware of the latest trends and threats in the industry. There's a common saying that attackers think in graphs and defenders think in lists. And as long as that's true, the attackers will win. So attackers will often look for the path of least resistance, or the easiest possible path to be able to complete their objectives. So those can often be more minor issues that, when tied together, create a very large impact. But the upside is that those attack paths can be proactively cut off early on in the attack chain, and then that sort of limits the potential damage that an adversary can do inside your network. And then the final thing is, adopt a defense in depth approach. So just assume that a breach can happen, and design your infrastructure and processes accordingly. So don't let the click of a link or the compromise of an edge device or leaked user credentials or something like that be the downfall of the organization. I think that's it. Is there any other questions?
Yeah, thanks so much for that, James. There is one more question that's popped up, which is whether we've identified an existing threat actor or malicious activity within a client's environment while we were running a red team simulation. Have you come across that in your work?
So that's not something I've come across myself, but that is something that we're always very conscious of, especially if we are able to compromise a client from the outside using a publicly available exploit. that would be a primary concern because, if we were able to do it, there's probably other threat actors out there that are also able to do the same thing. So, if there was any indication that a previous compromise had happened, that would be something that we'd immediately stop the assessment and relay that information to the client so that they can sort of enact incident response policies and act accordingly.
Yeah, thanks. And I'm not aware of any engagements that we've been on where we have seen any threat actors in the network during what we plan to be a red team engagement. But sometimes the red team is called on by the incident response team to support in identifying attack paths while they're deploying defensive measures within a known breached environment. So, maybe they're deploying EDR, they're trying to cut off any external access and any egress from the environment as well for any beacons and things like that. But while they're getting set up and all of this is underway, then we're sometimes called in to try and support and identify those attack paths that might still be open and help them prioritize how to get to those. We have another question around whether we've had problems running this kind of simulation with products like Cortex XDR or CrowdStrike. That's a good question.
Yeah, so I think, enterprise EDR solutions are obviously a lot more complicated to bypass than what I've demonstrated here with sort of standard antivirus solution. So a lot of modern endpoint detection and response systems will have behavioral and heuristic detections as well as just purely technical detections. So I think the answer is yes. It's much more difficult to bypass those types of solutions. It is possible, and there are ways. There's ways around pretty much most technical controls, but that really depends on the sophistication of the threat actor, and it's likely that there will be telemetry available along the way. So it might not result in a direct alert, but there may be indications that malicious activity is sort of underway. So yes, in answer to the question, yes, it is difficult to bypass those kind of solutions.
It is difficult, right? But you have quite a lot of experience doing that. And the other side of the coin is that in the incident response space, as you were saying, 1 in 4 of our clients do have this type of solution that's not only deployed but centrally managed, and we'll figure out, after or during the incident that, telemetry has been created, alerts have been created, and just no actions have been taken on that particularly. So they've provided quite a long time frame for the threat actor to work on their payloads, to work on their techniques, etc., to make sure that they are not blocked and they can move on to the next step. So it's really not just the technology that needs to block the threat actor in an environment like this. If you have any other questions that come to you after this webinar, or if you'd like to chat about red teaming more, please feel free to contact us. It's been really a great session. Thanks very much for all of you for attending.